Hello everyone, my name is Augusto Argandoña. Welcome to my watercolor tutorials. This demonstration is about a beach scene. It would be one in a series of paintings, demonstrations that I will be doing about beach images. And it's a fairly simple composition. Showing water, have the lower 1/3 will be most of the 1/3 of the paper will be the water, the sand, and the greenery that's in the sand, the grasses and so forth. The rest will be sky, so I'm going to be painting that way. So I'm just doing a quick line work for the horizon. And just a few lines of guidelines for where I'm going to put the sand, the dunes, and the grasses. There will be some, maybe some vegetation over here, some trees or something like that. And then the sand. And I'm going to bring the water at a little bit of an angle here, the shoreline, just to give it a little bit more variety as opposed to following the horizon line. So that's the composition. My paper is Arches, 140-pound cold press. My pigments are a variety of brands, although most of my pigments are Winsor & Newton. I also use some of the brands. And the brushes that I use are for the most part flats. Occasionally I will use a round brush, but it's mostly flats. I'm more partial towards the flat brushes. So let's get to the fun part of this demonstration, which is the painting. So I'm going to start by wetting the upper part where the sky will be. And I'm going to add quite a bit of water in that area. I'm going to have pretty much just a blue sky, and I'm going to bring that water right to the horizon, right there, like that. And just make sure that the sky area is fairly well covered with water. My paper is at an angle, approximately 15-degree angle. So I'm going to rely on, let me move this. I'm going to rely on gravity to mix the colors. So now I'm going to change brushes to my other flat brush. I'm going to pick up some manganese blue and some cobalt blue, primarily the cobalt. And I'm going to just start adding some of the strokes of those blue colors, a little bit more of each, and just dropping in a few areas, a few strokes here and there, making sure that I'm leaving some whites for the clouds. I'm going to add a little bit more over here. And I'm going to use the brush this way, kind of just move it around, like that. The least amount of time spent on the sky, the better. I'm going to also bring a little bit of ultramarine blue with a little touch of burnt umber, just to give it a little bit of a gray tint to some of this cloud areas, like that. And maybe a little bit over here, combine it right into the blue. And that's about it for the sky. I'm going to bring it just a little bit more of the cobalt blue into these areas. And there it is, that's my sky. Then we get rid of this line over here. There we are. And so while that is drying, I'm also going to add quite a bit of water to where the sand will be. There we are. Just adding quite a bit of water because the sand is going to be fairly soft. I'm going to paint it so it looks fairly soft. No hard edges, nothing like that. And immediately I'm going to come back with a very tiny amount of burnt sienna in some areas, not overall, just a few areas like that. Also going to mix a little bit of brown matter and cobalt blue, which makes a really nice gray. Very nice soft gray, and I'm going to add some of that too here, especially on this side, which will have some of the shadow areas. Like that. A little bit on this side too. Like that. And on the foreground, I'm going to bring a little bit more of the blue into that gray and do this. Just quick decisive strokes. That's the best way to do this. And on the wet paper. And there we are. And that's about it for now. That's the base color. I may go back a little more later. In fact, I think now I'm going to go back a little bit more and add some ultramarine with that brown matter. This will be a little darker gray. I'm going to increase the value of some of these shadow areas while the paper is damp. Like that. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry. Clean my brush really good. At this point, it's better not to go back to the sky because the paper is still damp. It's not wet anymore, it's damp. And the pigment has already moved in different directions. And that's the way I like to show. A little bit of the gray on the bottom of the clouds, a little bit less over here, a little bit more over there. So we'll have some whites. Some white in the horizon, a few areas of blue towards the horizon. You see how this is happening, what's happening here. Some of this water from here is moving here, and some of the pigment from here is moving out. I'm going to leave that alone. I may put I may cover that area later, but for now, I think I'm going to leave it alone. Now, I'm going to test the wetness on the paper. The best way to test the wetness on the paper is with the back of your hand. Never do it this way because there's always some type of oil, or some ladies, females will use hand creams, lotions or whatever, and you touch the paper, especially when there's pigmentation in it, and it makes a mark, and it's very, very difficult to get rid of that. So this area still, it's almost beginning to dry, which is good. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and do the water. I'm going to paint this image to make it look like the Atlantic coast because of some of these high dunes, which we don't have on the Gulf Coast here in Florida. So I'm going to start by using some cobalt teal with ultramarine. And with the edge of my flat brush, I'm going to do this as straight a line as I can. Well, my paper is still kind of damp, so I'm going to reduce the amount of pigment and the water in my brush. But I'm going to use that later as part of the sky. So I'm going to just bring it all the way over here. And leave a little bit of white on the edge because I don't want this to bleed into the sand, and leave some of those white parts on the paper to indicate the the crests of waves that are breaking into the water, onto the the water, or in this area onto the sand. So I'm gonna bring a little bit more of that cobalt teal. I'm gonna bring that over here like that, and bring a little bit of blue over here, and show a little bit more of those white areas. There we are. Yeah. Okay. Now, while that is drying, I'm going to bring some more ultramarine blue, this time with some Payne's gray, fairly dark. Yeah, that's looking pretty good actually. It almost looks like rain, which is great. So I'm going to add a little bit more of that dark blue towards the horizon, like this. There we are. And now clean my brush. And with the damp brush, I'm going to soften that edge like that, and bring a little bit more of that color into some of the areas like that. Okay. Now I'm going over that blue line in the horizon and removing some of the excess. I'm just leaving it like that. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to fix this when the paper is dry. And in order to dry that a little bit more, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this board and fan the paper like this. And that should further dry the paper. Okay, how's this? Good. So now what I'm going to do is take a round brush, weight adjust it slightly, and with a fairly almost dry brush, I'm going to start softening this, getting rid of that effect. And that's the way to create a different dimension for the sky, for the clouds, and at the same time get rid of that bleeding of the blue into the sky. I didn't add, my brush is almost dry, so that's the way to do that. If my brush had some more moisture, some more water, this will not be done that way. So I'm going to keep doing that there. Okay, so now that's fixed, and that's how you fix what would otherwise be a kind of a strange looking horizon in the water. When the paper is completely dry, I'm going to go back to it, but for now I'm going to leave it like that. Now this area is almost dry, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a few strokes of some dampness to the paper, not wetting it, just dampen the paper here a little bit with almost not a dry brush, but not a wet brush either. Just a little few areas like that. Few over here. And then now I'm going to pick up some raw sienna and a little bit of this ultramarine blue that I already have in my palette, mixed already. And I'm going to go ahead and do some areas of color like this for where the grasses will be. I'm going to dampen those areas a little bit more. Like that. Now bring those colors in. Like that. Bring a little bit of aureole and yellow into that mixture, kind of brighten up a little bit those areas for where the grasses will be up in the dunes, and creating a walkway to the beach this way. Like that. Okay, so now I'm going to let that dry. While that is drying, there's some paper that's kind of dry here. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to this area. Not too much again. I'm basically dampening the paper, not wetting it. There. And now I'm going to use more of that raw sienna with the ultramarine, make it a little bit darker. I'm going to bring some raw amber into that mixture also. And I'm going to barely touch the paper and do some trees over here. Like that. Some a little lighter, some a little darker, like that. A little bit more raw amber, maybe a little bit of sepia, and combined with the ultramarine. And make sure that this board doesn't move too much. And barely touch the paper here, and separate the bristles in my brush, a bit more of the sepia, and do some of the little details on the perimeter, the details of the foliage in these trees. There we are. Get some undersea green and sepia mixed with the ultramarine, and a little bit more, little darker areas, like that. And let that dry. I'm gonna bring this all the way down here, like that, and let that dry. While that's drying, I'm going to test that's fine. I'm going to change brushes to a smaller flat brush, get more of that raw amber, this time with some cerulean blue. Very little water in my brush, mostly almost a dry brush effect. And I'll separate the bristles of the brush like this. When you do this, that brush has to be damp, not wet. And then I'm start doing some of the grasses, like that. Not too much, but just do some. Again, you put your brush against your finger like this, press it, and separate the bristles like that. So I'm going to do some of that over here. See how those grasses are really done very nicely, and you can move your brush in different directions to show that these grasses are kind of blowing in the wind and the breeze. Overlap the water a little bit in those areas. Make them a little dark in other areas. like this over here. I'm going to make some darker over here like that. Bring some over here. As we get up into the dune, they're going to be smaller. Maybe bring some of that green into the sand like that and create a different dimension for those grasses. Do some over here. I don't know, some over here maybe. But in the foreground, it'll be I'm going to make them darker because you're going to be seeing more of that, of them, and a little taller also. Not too many, not too much, a little bit more there. So now what I've done is here I created this nice little path going into the beach, not through the center but on the diagonal configuration. And there, so that's pretty much done. So now I'm going to take my round brush again, kind of dampen this area a little bit, not too much, and bring that gray that I had before that I used for the clouds, and on the damp paper I'm going to add some details of where the sand has been disturbed. Just like that. This can be disruptions in the sand and the pattern of the sand, or footsteps or something like that. Bring some all the way there like that. There. Okay. I'm going to give this a little bit more interest. So my paper is dry here. So I'm going to go ahead and take some red with cadmium red. And put a little umbrella over here. There we are. I'm going to reduce some of the pigmentation there like that. Pick up a little bit of the gray and just give it a nice light line. Pick up some burnt umber and a little bit of sepia mixed with that, and I will put a couple of people kind of sitting here like that. There we are, and that's about it. And then lastly I'll take a small brush, pick up some of the, with a very little water, the gray that I have, that I used before, and then bring some seagulls. Like that. Paper still damp there. Oops, I made a mess here. We'll fix that. That's an easy fix. Get some water in my brush. This area was still damp, so that's, and we can fix that there, that way. There. I think that's something that happens with watercolors, and there's a simple beach scene. So now I'm going to remove this tape and you'll get a better idea of how this looks. As you can see, the paper was dry when I started. I started wetting it for the sky, I waited some areas for the sand, and did most of the painting on damp or wet paper. So now I'm gonna put this over here, and so you can see there it is, the beach scene. Thank you very much for watching this demo. I hope you enjoy my painting. Until next time.